Hi, it's Mark from Top Local Lead Generation. We're here with Mr. Bernie Pawlik of Pawlik Automotive in Vancouver. They've been voted 14 times so far as best in Vancouver, best auto repair in Vancouver by their clients. And Bernie, I guess we're going to be talking about a service on a Mazda CX9 brake job. Is that right?
We are. Yeah, we're going to talk today about a rear brake job on a Mazda CX9.
So brakes are pretty standard. What makes this job special?
Well, what makes this job special, you're right. We do a lot of brake jobs at our shop. A lot of shops do brake jobs. It's a pretty standard service. Next to oil changes, it's probably one of the most common services that you do in a general repair shop. What makes this job special, nothing special about the brakes in this car, but I want to show the way we do the work at Pawlik Automotive, the time we take to do a brake job properly. There's a lot of shops around that I see less of them than I used to, but really cheaply advertised. It used to be like the $69.95 disc brake job, and I often wondered, how can anyone do a brake job that cheap? I mean, even if you buy the cheapest parts on earth, you make zero money. But anyways, someone's doing it. I don't know why or how, but I just want to show what we put into our brake jobs, because there's certainly a far cry from that kind of price, just to show you what you're getting and how to do a proper brake job.
So can't I just change the brake pads? After all, isn't that the part that wears out?
Well, yeah, I mean, the brake pads are the item that wears out, but there's a lot more to brakes than brake pads. And so for what we do, the first part of our brake job is to do an inspection, a thorough inspection. So we take the wheels off. Actually, it starts with a road test first to see how the brakes feel. Then we take the wheels off and we measure the brake pads. How thick are they? We measure the brake rotors. How thick are they? Is there rust on the brake rotors? And I'll show you some pictures coming up. We move the brake calipers to see how they move, test the brake fluid to see if it's got water content and the quality of the brake fluid, and just a visual inspection of all the brake lines and hoses, because they wear out over time. So yes, I mean, there's a lot more to brakes than pads, and the inspection is where we start.
All right, so after the inspection, you have a lot better idea about exactly how big a job this is going to be, I guess.
Exactly, and sometimes it's fairly straightforward, and other times it's more complex. So let's just start looking at some pictures here. I got a whole number of pictures to share today, and just talk about the individual components we generally deal with. So this is our basically the rear brakes, with the left rear brake with the wheel off. You can see the brake caliper on the right. The brake disc or rotor is the big, large, round piece. Now, so let's talk about the brake rotor. So these are, this is what the brake pad rubs against. This is the brake rotor removed, and you can see it's been on this car since new. There's a lot of rust around. There's a smooth section, that's where the brake pad rubs. Then there's a rusty section, which is where the brake pad doesn't rub. The brake rotors are made basically of a cast iron type material. They're prone to rust. They're out there being exposed to the elements. So the moment you put them on, they're rusting away. And if you look on the inside near where the holes are, where the wheel bolts on, this is where the parking brake shoes sit. And you can see that's quite rusty in there. So rotors are something we replace almost every brake job. Yes, you can machine them. And some our shop, we do have a brake lathe where we could machine them. But usually what happens is once you machine them, the rotors get thin. They tend to warp easier. The brakes don't wear out that quickly, so it's better to actually just replace the rotors and pads all at the same time. Then you get a proper brake job. You look at this rotor, you see it's all brand new, fresh metal. It's nice and thick, so you get the best life that you possibly can out of the rotor. Now, the next component we're going to look at, and this is a small little detail, but something we do every time. This is the wheel hub. Now, this is where the brake rotor slides onto, and it's sandwiched onto the hub and held in place by the wheel bolts. Now, if you notice, there's a lot of rust around that area. So what we do is we clean it off, and here's an example of what it looks like afterwards. You can see it's shiny, clean. There's not a lot of rust. I mean, rust tends to it bubbles, so it doesn't give a good smooth surface. Again, there's the old, there's the new. It doesn't give a good surface for the brake rotor to sit against unless you clean it. So we take the time to clean that corrosion off, so we're sure the brake rotor sits properly. If it doesn't sit properly, it can cause brake rotors to warp prematurely and vibrations when you put the brake pedal on. Just another little note too, behind this wheel hub, you can see a sort of round piece up above. That's the adjuster for the parking brake, and the round sort of circular piece that is just a little larger in diameter than the wheel hub. Those are the parking brake shoes. These do crack occasionally and wear out, but we don't change them too often. And the other thing we do is when we do the new rotors and pads, we adjust the parking brake as well. Another little detail we take care of. So next very important component is the brake caliper. The brake caliper squeezes the brake pads against the brake rotor. And the caliper, it has a piston. Well, this one has one piston. Some have two, some have four. Even some fancy imported cars will have 6 or 8 piston calipers. But this is basically a one piston caliper with a sliding section, probably the most common design you'll find on a car. And I've got the red arrow there points to a critical part that needs servicing. Inside that's where the brake pads, there's an ear on the brake pad. It sits in there and the pad slides subtly back and forth. And over time, corrosion develops in that area. This is something we clean out. I'll show you a few more details later. This arrow points to the brake caliper slider, and inside there's basically the arrow is pointing to a rubber dust boot, but there's a pin inside. Again, I'm going to show you another picture. Inside there, we take this apart, clean it, lubricate it, and service it, because if water moisture gets in there, it'll seize that up, and the caliper will not work and wear the brake pads out. So here's some close-up views. This is the brake as we removed the first picture I showed you with the arrow. This is the top. You're looking at the caliper bracket, and you can see a lot of rust corrosion in that sort of grooved area, and that metal piece down below is the caliper. Basically it's a shim that allows the pad to slide back and forth. So that's how it looked when it came off. And this is how it looks after we clean it up. That shim at the bottom is actually brand new, which comes in the brake pad set we buy. But sometimes they don't come with that, so we clean them up. But we have a sandblaster, and we actually put the caliper bracket in a sandblaster and remove all the corrosion, so you get the proper fit and proper pad movement, and for the duration of the life of the brake pad. We also use a special lubricant on these parts, and I'll show you that later, to prevent corrosion and keep everything moving nicely. And so our next photo, these are the slider pins. That was the second picture with the arrow that I showed you. These are what the pins look like when they're removed. And again, these are in perfect shape. If we didn't lubricate them, it probably wouldn't have mattered too much, but we do normally, as a course of doing this work, we take it out, we wipe them off, we put fresh lubricant in there, make sure it's all lubricated well so it lasts for a long time. So that's basically the calipers. Now, one thing on brakes is the calipers will seize up. If you get water into the caliper piston and it corrodes, and the caliper is basically junk, has to be replaced. Same if you get a lot of water in these slider pins, they need to be, and they seize up, you normally need to replace the caliper as well. In this case, nothing needed to be done like that. It only happens maybe 1 in every 3 or 4 brake jobs where it gets that bad. So let's get to the brake pads, which is everybody knows about. So this is a view of the old brake pad on the left, the new brake pad on the right. And you can actually see this pad. If you look at the pad on the left, you can actually see it's worn on a little bit of an angle. And that's because there was a lot of corrosion in the pad slider area, and the pad wasn't moving very well. It's kind of subtle, but if you look closely, you can kind of see it. And you can see the new pad, how much thicker it is than the old one. Now, these pads could have lasted a little longer, but this is kind of the ideal time to change them. You don't want to leave them too much longer than this. And here we have the final view of the brake job. The brake's back together. If you, I can just show a quick picture of what it looked like beforehand, just to kind of get a sense. There's our before picture, kind of rusty, and it's still functional, but kind of rusty. And there's our new brakes, nice, shiny, and new. And if you see that purple colored lubricant, we put that on the back of the brake pads as well as all the sliding points. It's a very high quality brake lubricant and prevents squeaks, squeals, keeps everything moving, and corrosion. So that is, in a nutshell, a Pawlik Automotive quality brake job, and the kind of brake job that, the way brakes should be done properly to last for another. This car had about 70,000 kilometers. These brakes will last at least that long, if not longer. So there you have a brake job on a Mazda CX9 done properly. That's awesome. There's a lot of details in there, Bernie, that I had no idea would have to be done. So thank you. Yeah. And if you just didn't do them, I mean, the brakes would probably work when you left the shop, but how long afterwards is another question. And we try to make sure that when we do the job, it's going to be good for a long time.
So maybe the difference between 20,000 kilometers and 70 or 80,000 kilometers more.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's been Mr. Bernie Pawlik of Pawlik Automotive in Vancouver. They're an award-winning shop. If you need any kind of general auto repairs, they do a lot of diesels, they do a lot of Mazdas, they do a lot of Subarus and BMWs and Mercedes and all sorts of stuff. So they're the guys to call. Best auto repair in Vancouver. You can reach them at 604-327-7112 or go to their excellent website, pawlikautomotive.com. Thanks, Bernie.
Thank you, Mark. Talk soon.
Bye.